Welcome to the second in the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada's ongoing series designed to help beginning collectors to get the maximum amount of enjoyment out of the hobby. I'm Greg Redner. I'm the Vice President of the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada. And in today's video, we're going to talk about stamp tongs. Now, it seems like kind of a pedestrian topic, and I know when I was very young and I was starting out, I thought, I don't need stamp tongs. What do I need these for? I can clearly pick up a stamp with my fingers. I wasn't collecting postal history then, but if I had been, obviously I can pick up an envelope and handle it. And there really wasn't any need in my mind for having stamp tongs until one day I had bought at the time, what I thought was a reasonably expensive cover that had the Lexington and Concord series stamps from the US on it. And it was a real beautiful cover. And that was a series that I was actively collecting, and I was really, really proud of it. And one night I was in my kitchen where I did most of my stamp collecting work, and I picked the cover up and I put it in its little sleeve and into the binder it went into, and thought, what a beautiful cover. I'm so lucky to have it. And a week later, I pulled that cover out, and there were two large thumbprints on the front of it. I had been working in the kitchen making dinner, and I had oil or butter on my fingers. And that didn't seem possible to me because, in fact, I had washed my hands, what I thought was, very carefully, but somehow the oil from my fingers had transferred to that cover, and I had diminished its beauty and its value considerably. So you really do need a set of stamp tongs, but it's a very personal subject. There are all kinds of different ones, and how do you choose the right one, and how do you get used to using them? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Why can't I use my fingers? Well, I've just given you a good reason why, a good example of that. But also, when you pick up a stamp from a working surface that you're on, you have to exert a force on the stamp, which is different than the force that would be applied when you were using tongs. You have to literally pull the stamp towards you. And this can lead to bent perfs. It can lead to creases in your stamp. It's not a safe way to pick up a stamp. Of course, sliding the stamp along the table to get it to the edge so that you're actually able to grab it without exerting any force is also not particularly successful because it can damage the gum on the back. So using your fingers is a bad idea. And you may be lucky for a while, but I guarantee you eventually you're going to think, why didn't I decide to get a stamp tong? So what are stamp tongs? They're simply extensions of your fingers that are designed to safely and carefully pick up a philatelic item. And here's a good example of what a stamp tong looks like. For our purposes, although this is an endless topic, for our purposes, there are four types of stamp tongs. There are spoon stamp tongs, pointed, rounded stamp tongs, which are a form of the pointed ones with less of an edge on it. And there are spade stamp tongs. Those are the four basic types, and we'll go over why you might want to use each one and what some of the dangers are. First thing first, tweezers are not stamp tongs. Yes, I know we all have a pair of tweezers in our bathroom sink drawer, but they're not good for stamps for a couple of reasons. First of all, the ends tend to be very sharp. And so it's possible to punch a hole in something as you're using these. The other thing is tweezers are meant to grip so that when you pull whatever you're pulling, be it a hair or whatever, eyebrow, it won't slide out of the tweezers, and the ridge surface near the end of the tweezer is in fact designed to grip it. And this, especially if you're collecting line engraved stamps or intaglio printed stamps, can really damage the surface of your stamp and can damage the glue if you use these to pick them up. So if you learn nothing else today, please do not use cosmetic tweezers in place of stamp tongs. So which stamp tong is right for you? Well, you see one in front of you right now. This is an example of a pointed tip stamp tong, although the one you're looking at is a variation on that, which is a rounded tip. The rounded tip is actually slightly safer to use when you're new to this than the pointed tong stamp tong is. A pointed stamp tong is designed to do really, really fine, delicate work. But the end of the tong is pointed, as the title infers. So while it is a good choice perhaps for somebody with a lot of experience, you can damage your stamps if you poke them the wrong way. So this is a nice kind of substitute for that. If you want something that will give you a precision control, but also is slightly less dangerous, and this is a rounded version of that. This is my particular favorite type of stamp tong, the spoon end stamp tong. I like it partly because it's very easy to pick things up from a flat surface with it. I can gently slide that spoon tip under. It gives me more surface to raise the stamp or raise the cover so that I'm not damaging any perfs or anything like that. And of course, the fact that it's rounded also means it's not sharp, which is very good. I also like this particular stamp tong because I collect postal history, and I really don't like to handle my covers too aggressively. And so the wide, flat end of this stamp tong makes it particularly useful for picking up light postal history, that kind of thing. Another type, which is a variation on the spoon type, is the spade type, so named because, of course, it looks like a shovel tip. Spade, again, is very, very useful for picking up postal history. In some ways, if you're dealing with larger envelopes or heavier paper, it's even more useful than the spoon tip because there's more surface, as you can see at the end, that comes in contact with the paper. It's also very good for picking up stamps as well, but it's slightly more clumsy for that than the first two that we've seen. The spade type of tong is also available in what's called an angled or a bent, sometimes an offset design. And you can imagine if you're trying to pick something up, the offset allows you to have a little bit better angle to manipulate it. There are some drawbacks with the offset design that makes doing some other things slightly more difficult because of the angle that the tongs are at. But many people like these, and I know that they're very popular. Okay, so you bought your stamp tong. None of these are very expensive. You don't have to go for an expert level, very high quality tong to begin with. You can buy 2 or 3 different kinds and experiment with them and see which one you like the best. But the number one bit of advice that can be given beyond don't use tweezers as tongs is practice with your stamp tong before you pick up your, inverted Jenny, which is worth, a sizable amount of money. You don't want to damage your valuable stamps by jumping right in. So one of the things that we all have is glassine envelopes full of, canceled stamps that aren't particularly valuable. We may have gotten them in a collection. We don't want to throw them out, but we keep them. And sometimes you think to yourself, what am I going to do with all these things? Well, now I've got an answer for you. Get a bunch of them out, spread them out on a flat surface, and practice picking up the stamps. Practice moving the stamps. Practice stacking your stamps up as you use your stamp tong. You can also practice applying hinges to the back of a used stamp if you use hinges. I know they're not so popular now, but with non-mint stamps, they're certainly fine. And so you can practice applying hinges. You can practice also attaching them to a piece of paper, not into your album probably to begin with, and try to get it as exact as possible. With a little practice, you can actually become quite fluid in your use of them. One of the other things that stamp tongs are very good for is if you use stock books. They're very helpful for placing your stamps in stock books and not bending them. And so here's a caveat, however, if your stock books, the individual rows have a clear plastic cover on them into which you put your stamps, be very careful. Those things are notorious for slicing your stamps if you miss putting them in. The glassine ones I prefer, but that's just a personal thing. So there you go. That's some things you needed to know about stamp tongs. Practice away, try a bunch of different ones, and find the one that's right for you. There's no right answer. If you like this video, please like our YouTube channel, Royal Philatelic Society of Canada. And by all means, get in touch with us if you have questions or would like to suggest a topic for this beginner series. You can do this by email, by emailing us at talks@rpc.org. Thanks for attending.